I have just jumped off a conversation with Cherie Canning. So I've been a guest in her amazing studio in Brisbane. It's phenomenal. She'll have a video that we'll share in a month or two. But something that Cherie and I spoke about before we hit record is that she's had this podcast. She's up to season 3. She decided over this summer break that it wouldn't be a thing that she's continued. And then she's just decided to restart it. So I'm curious around that decision. What prompted you to bring back the show?
Yes. Thank you for having me on your show. You know what? Ultimately, the reason for the pause was around time. So to begin with, I was really questioning myself around the default of doing what I'd always done and then asking myself, is this worth my time? And that's, I find, a really hard question to answer because I wasn't doing it for me. So then I had to really dig deep, and a few people, actually, the key was I just had these messages coming through, people connecting on LinkedIn saying, I've listened to your podcast, X, Y, and Z. I had voice notes from people saying the impact different episodes it had. And it really got me thinking, is this me and my time? Is this a selfish act not to unpause the podcast? Like, if I actually put it back out to the world, what kind of impact could this have? And thinking about it from the listener's perspective.
Of course, you put yourself in their shoes and potential impact. I think you and I are really similar because we're also talking about, you can look at downloads, you can look at stats, you can look at what is the direct impact of it.
Yeah.
That's like the return on investment question. And then there's also that return on luck question, like the ROL, which is like, well, what are the opportunities? Like, who can I impact? And I don't know, I'm sure many business consultants would say, Leanne, stop focusing on ROL and focus on ROI. But you seem quite similar. It's like that kind of feeling.
So similar. And then I default, because I've got a husband who's really good with ROI versus ROL. And people will often say, well, what's the cost? I had a conversation 2 weeks ago. Someone was really curious about starting their own. What does it cost? And actually, now I'm saying this out loud to you, I realize that conversation hit the unpause button for me also, because it said I couldn't actually tell you exactly what it costs. I can tell you what I paid for the equipment, and I can tell you how many hours we put into it, and if we're paying a sound engineer here or there, or what you might be physically investing. But I actually can't tell you what I'm gaining back because it's not so tangible. So I couldn't actually tell you, yes, there's some outgoings, but is it actually costing me, or is it actually a profitable exercise? I couldn't tell you because it's hard to really. How do you know? How do you know?
I know. And I think when we're talking on your show, I was talking about writing a book. And I guess one of the reasons I could do that was because I had like 200 episodes about it. And so I guess the value of the book writing and an indirect line to the value of the podcast was that over the 5 years of doing that, I'd created all these ideas around it that I could then just move into a book. And same with you and your potential idea around your book.
Lead with courage, yes.
So it's never really, and I think when we ask the question around ROI and what does it cost and what's the benefit, I think we're really missing out. I think there's maybe 2 schools of business on this. And there's people like us that just like look for the upside opportunities.
Absolutely.
Versus the cut and dry of the data.
Yeah, it is. And then the expression that I love to hear as well, what's the opportunity cost? Because we can't always see that. And that's where I come back to, all right, well, there's the cut and dry of the data and the actual hard costs on a P&L, but what is the opportunity cost of not doing the podcast? And even, I don't know what this is in me, but I thought, does it look like I'm a quitter? That really sat with me going, so I do 2 seasons and then I just quit? It's too hard. Well, I don't want that to be my brand, that I won't persist with something because it might take some time or some, blood, sweat and tears. But actually there's not that much blood, sweat and tears. I've just got to get smart about how I manage my time and how we get the recordings, not a daily dose like you, but even yours is very smart and efficient around how you're doing that. So yeah, the opportunity cost for me was something I wasn't willing to walk away from.
Yeah. And I think kind of when you talk about, the cost of the gear, it doesn't actually, to get a potential guest, to even have a one-on-one session with them would cost a couple of $1,000, but through the podcast, you get the opportunities to talk to these great people.
Yeah.
It's like your professional development, your personal development.
You are absolutely right. I literally spoke to someone else today who runs their own podcast, and we said, if you called half the guests that you have and said, have you got an hour for a coffee? most of them wouldn't have time. But the minute you say, have you got an hour for a podcast? It's a win-win. So it's good for their brand. It's good for them sharing their authority and expertise, and it's great for you. And they say yes. And I learn so much from just being deep in conversation with people. There's so much I take away. So yeah, maybe actually it's just for my own personal development.
And that's okay. That's
and
okay.
that seems okay.
You've had a ton of conversations today, and like you have a business built on the back of you speaking and sharing your ideas with Illuminate Leadership. Tell us about your business journey really quickly and what you do for those, and also about your podcast. You've got to share that.
Well, thank you. So the podcast is called Lead with Courage, so you can check that out. Illuminate Leadership, I would say, is a COVID baby business. Up until COVID, I was actually working at Flight Centre for 17 years, and I would have considered myself a flighty for life. My last role at Flight Centre leading up to COVID was leadership development. So I was running a lot of different workshops in leadership development in-house. And when COVID hit, as we will remember, COVID and travel do not mix well. And actually, Andy, my husband, and I, both at Flight Centre at the time, we got stood down on the same day in March 2020. And the writing was on the wall, leadership development, and we were supporting the support businesses. So there was no one left. I think 10,000 people got made redundant or stood down, within weeks. So there was no business to go and develop leaders for, and it wasn't personal. It was whatever was next. So for me, I knew that this kind of work is what sets my soul on fire, and I just love. And I applied for a good number of jobs and just didn't get the right opportunity. And toward the end, I almost went to a startup for this guy, and he had no IP, no network, nothing, but just thought it would be a good idea. And
I love those people.
Yeah, I know. And then hired me to do it for him. And it was incredible, actually. I had a day in the life, or a couple of hours, and we had a lead, a customer lead. I took the call, and the lady said, it was the end of 2020. She said, we can't do anything to the new year. Our people are exhausted. I said, I hear you. It's the end of 2020. And this founder, he said, no, we need it now. We need it now. I said, but what the customer actually wants. No, I want it now. And I just looked at him in that moment to go, I said, look, this isn't going to work for us. For me, I've got to listen. Like, I can't not listen to that customer. I don't think we're going to be able to work together. I shook his hand and said, thanks for the opportunity, and literally went and started my own launch.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, straight away went, I've just got to back myself.
You just felt that. You
Yep. Stop waiting for someone else to put their faith in me. I've got to back myself. And so,
I love this story. How did I not know this story?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So I started Illuminate Leadership the end of 2020.
Yeah.
And here we are 4 and a bit years later.
And you've got an amazing client roster. You're doing incredible work. Like everything, every time I see you post on LinkedIn, just the joy that you're bringing your clients, but the joy you even bring to that kind of lame social platform. I shouldn't bag it out because LinkedIn has been very good for both of us.
Yes.
You do bring that light.
Thank you. And I think that whole thing about Illuminate is about light. Like, how do we bring light to leadership? How do we bring light to life? How do we bring more joy into what we do? And there's capabilities in there that we develop capability, but also I think it's actually just developing a better human and a greater human. So I feel very fortunate. The variety of work we get to do, the range of customers, very industry agnostic, which makes for me high on variety. This is like a load of fun. So it's a real dream and a treat.
Oh, good on you. And where can people find your podcast?
Yes, everywhere you listen to podcasts. So Lead with Courage, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen, and illuminateleadership.com.au, and on all the social platforms as well.
Yeah, cool. Put links in the show notes for this one. Cherie, thanks so much. So great to hear that story.
Thank you, Leanne.
And been fun to connect today.
Thank you. And I can't wait to keep listening to these. I'm loving your daily dose, so keep them coming. Thank you.
Yay.